Hello, good evening, everyone. So I've been tasked by my friend, Vinod, to actually perform this particular lecture series. So I've been tasked to talk about reply speech. So that's what I'll do. So before I begin, just let me briefly introduce myself. My name is Patrick, Patrick Cheang. So I was part of Team Malaya when we competed in the 2021 UADC, where we emerged as champions. So today I've been tasked with giving a lecture on reply speech. So to some of you who might already be aware of what reply speeches are, then this is just additional pointers that we can do in order for us to actually give an impactful reply speech. To those of us who are perhaps rather new to debating, this might be your first major, and therefore you might want to know, what exactly is a reply speech? Like, I didn't have to debate this part or give this particular speech in BP, so what exactly is different here? So today we're going to look at just a very short lecture. So obviously I'm not going to speak in detail. Other lectures might be 30 minutes long. Maybe this will be 15 because it's a reply speech, so you actually be shorter, proportional to the length of the actual reply speech anyways. So how to actually win with a 0.5 margin. So let's just look at what a reply speech actually is. So what exactly is a reply speech? Now, a reply speech is special in the sense that among all the other speeches across both BP and AP format, it is the only 4-minute speech. Why? Because I think the intention of a reply speech is not necessarily to build upon the case or to not necessarily attack or respond to the other team, but rather it is situated at the end of the debate for the speakers and for the team essentially to give a brief adjudication about what exactly has transpired throughout the debate and why your team deserved to win. So I think in this particular regard, the expectation that judges as well as other debaters have in a reply speech is that you are not going to add anything new, but rather just imagine yourself as an adjudicator, but rather a biased one because you are going to speak on behalf of your team from a judge's point of view why they should give the win to your team. So treat it as the last ditch effort for your team to pitch why you deserve to win. So let's just briefly go through, especially on the basics about what a reply speech is. So it is 4 minutes. There are no POIs to be given, and you shall not take any. You will hear a clap, not to signify that you can actually start asking POI, but rather that you have 1 minute. So that comes at the third minute. At the fourth minute, you will hear two claps. At the third minute, clap, you really should stop speaking. Okay, so unlike the order of government opposition, for reply speeches, the op reply speaker will speak after the opposition whip, and then the gov reply speaker will be the last speaker in the entire debate. So the order is a bit shifted. So your speaker score is half. So basically, if you are deemed to have given in an ordinary speech a 79 speech, that speech will be scored 39.5 because that is half of what a 79 is. Now, and this goes out to all the other judges as well. Please make sure that if you are not very mathematically inclined to use a calculator, because we have seen instances where a person gave an 80 speech only for their reply speech to be scored a 38, which would mean that it is a speech worth 36. So unless their standard dramatically decreased in the span of like a few minutes, I don't think that's possible. So just you are great in mathematics, but just not as great as you think. So please use the calculator. But yeah, essentially for reply speech, your speaker score will be passed. That is why if it is a very, very, very close debate, the closest margin that can be achievable in the AP debate is 0.5, which we actually got because we went up against the Great Lumsky, and it was a 0.5 margin win for us because to the judge, again, the Great Yarn, he felt that it was only decided at the reply speech because of how close it was. So therefore, you have a margin of 0.5, which means that a reply speech is especially important in close rounds because in the event that both teams are evenly matched, the reply speech will be the deciding factor between who wins and who loses. Now, I've already talked about the bias implication portion. Basically, just imagine yourself as a judge, but rather than speaking neutrally with no vested interest, you are to speak with a vested interest because your job is to convince the judges to see and decide on the call the way you want them to believe. So that is how you convince them. And that is essentially what a reply speech is. So now for the next two slides, we will go through what briefly you should do in the reply speech and you shouldn't do in the reply speech. But before I go on further, I would just like to point out that unlike a prime minister's speech, unlike a leader of opposition speech, where even though there are perfect differences, more often than not, the things that are expected of a prime minister and a leader of opposition role-wise is the same, correct? There's somewhat of a setup, there's definition, you have to provide context, and then you have to sort of ascertain burdens for both teams. So in a way, there are expectations towards what a prime minister and what a leader of opposition should do, similarly to what a deputy prime minister and a deputy leader of opposition ought to do. But for a reply speech, your brief is simple. Just persuade the judges to see the call as you want them to see, which means that similar to why there are no standard judging format, there is also no standard reply speech format. So basically, this 4 minutes is up to you in order to order it in the way that you want, that you feel is the most persuasive, which also means that we have very high level debating, like we are talking about the semifinals or finals of previous UADCs, whereby the reply speech is super technical, i.e., the debater goes by, oh, here are different clashes as to why we won. We want this, we want this, we want this. Therefore, in most of the more insignificant clashes, we've actually already won. But I've also seen a team that eventually won UADC, whereby the entire reply speech is just a very passionate and charged speech about the impacts of war and why they think that in order to save more lives, they are in that particular instance, that reply speech wasn't very technical per se, but it is very persuasive because there were a lot of emotions, there were a lot of appeal towards humanitarian causes, which means that a reply speech does not have any fixed format, but rather it is up to the team in order to decide what they should do and what is the best game plan moving forward after deciding what is the climate per se within that particular debate. Now let's go towards what you should do. So again, these are just some pointers. They are obviously not the only things that you can do, but just based on my experience as a reply speaker, here are what things that I would recommend, as well as observing other top reply speakers as well. Now, the first thing I want to say, and this is rather obvious, is to highlight the winning clashes. And this is perhaps where a lot of debaters will ask, oh, isn't that what the whip is supposed to do? Yes, because if you notice, a judge, sometimes when they give feedback, it is also very reminiscent of how a whip delivers their speech as well, which means that in deciding who won the debate, obviously you have to talk about clashes, correct? You have to decide what are the main clashes that happen within the debate, and based on those clashes, why do you think a particular team did better? Which also means that if you're a reply speaker, you have to highlight what the winning clash is. Because why bother winning clashes if you're not going to highlight them, right? Because by highlighting the winning clashes, you also prove to the judges two things. A, that you are spot on in identifying the correct stakeholders and the correct arguments to support those stakeholders, how you actually actualize the impact, whether or not the premises and the principles are well established, and vice versa, your opponents did not achieve and prove why that clash can be won by them via their arguments. Which also means that if you highlight the winning clashes, you're essentially telling the judges this is perhaps for your consideration a clash that you can think you can decide upon, and which is why we want that. So you should give us the win. So that's the first thing. Now the second thing is on calling out damaging concession, and I think this is something that a lot of times teams often don't do in their reply speeches because understanding that there is a difference between responding and calling out things that have already been called out, which means that as a reply speaker, you are not allowed to, quote unquote, similar to what a judge is, read into the debate, meaning you cannot add new things that weren't there. But obviously, if something was already stated by the previous team, you can use that in order to convince the judge of why those concessions are damaging to the opponents. So now is the time to bring up the receipts. So if you actually feel that your opponents have actually done something damaging, for example, they agreed to a premise that they shouldn't have, they used an argument that contradicted another speaker's argument. Now it's the time for you to actually point those things out, because in pointing damaging concessions, you also weaken the overall case line of your opponents. So that's the second thing. Now, the third thing is on using the right delivery. And this is where we actually talk about why, if you recall earlier, I said that the very passionate and feeling the speech that's very emotionally charged won the debate, won the finals of UADC. So there is no fixed structure. So rather than being intimidated by the fact that it's a free for all, use it to your advantage. Basically, what you need to do is to utilize the correct delivery method. So for example, if it is a very technical debate where both teams pretty much are very factual, there are a lot of stakeholders being discussed, maybe the approach is to use prioritization and also being very technical when it comes to identifying the clashes that won or lost the debate for the team. Now, secondly, when we talk about tone, obviously you can incorporate different emotions into it. In a war debate, for example, you might want to treat it with a bit more care and be more serious, because obviously the impact is way larger as well. But for example, in a debate about humanitarian causes, you might want to appeal towards emotions and talking about why these particular stakeholders' lives will be so much so affected, and therefore you might want to use that in order to try and get the judges to be on your side. Similarly, this is something that I think could be done a lot more in debating, because essentially debating is about sometimes using humor as well. Because for you to reach a point, it is not just you being the most factual, it is also you being able to utilize sarcasm, humor, in order to call out the fact that your opponent conceded to something they shouldn't have, or the fact that a lot of things they say don't really make much sense. So use the right delivery method, because in the reply speech, it's really up to you. And because that's the last speech from your team that the judges will would decide upon, you might want to use that time in order to get the most attention to your team. And sometimes being the most memorable one can be just being the funniest in the room. So Vinod, who is on the core this year, he's a very humorous speaker as well. So previously, when he does his whip speech, and then I follow up with my reply speech, when we are both very humorous and humorous speakers, it's easier for the judges to actually remember us, because we are just sarcastic, and that's great sometimes, not all the time. Okay, the last thing is to read the room. So obviously, this is something of what we call a spatial awareness in debate. If you feel like a particular argument in your team is not well received, maybe you want to tell it in a different way, as what a whip should do. You should also say that has actually been very important. Just because the other team ignored it doesn't mean that it's not an important stakeholder or consideration. But at the same time, if the debate has been super messy, now is the time to actually really compartmentalize and inform the judge on what matters and what doesn't. Perhaps that's the best time for you to do so, because it is the end of the debate. There's nothing else that can be added. You can't add anything as well. Your opponents can't add anything. So might as well just surmise it in a way of identifying what's important and what's not. So these are 4 general pointers about what judges sort of expect in the reply speech and what you could do. Obviously, are there scenarios where you can use all 4? Maybe not. You only have 4 minutes. But more often than not, these are 4 things that I would personally keep in mind when I'm deciding what is the approach that I should go with my reply speech. All right. And the last slide is on what you should not do. So very easy to remember. You are not allowed to add new arguments, because if whips aren't allowed to add new arguments, what makes you think you're special? So this is something that I see teams adding new arguments in their reply speech. It's already bad enough if whips do it, but if you're a reply speaker and you add new arguments, I'm smelling something in the room, and that is desperation. So please do not do that. You should not do that. In fact, I've known of reply speakers who do that only for them to actually be less persuasive. And in the reply speech, you are supposed to be persuasive. So that actually docked onto your points. And they actually raise the judge against you. So please do not do that. It's counterintuitive anyways. Okay, add new rebuttals. This is a bit of gray area, because what qualifies as responses, what qualifies as just you summarizing the debate. So the reason why you shouldn't add new argument responses is because replies are meant to decide why your team has won based on materials that have been provided by the earlier 6 speakers. If an opt reply speaker is to add new rebuttals, that would also mean that a gov reply speaker can add new rebuttals. And it's unfair because there's no one going after gov reply speaker. So in order for it to be fair, and similar again, like what I mentioned earlier, why a judge is not allowed to read into the debate and form their own argumentation and respond, as a reply speaker, you are also not allowed to add any rebuttals. I think it's just fair. Okay. Lastly, these are the 2 pointers as well. Only highlighting your arguments. Okay, so you only talk about your arguments, and I understand sometimes this train of thought because you are like, I only have 4 minutes. I just want to talk about myself. That's great, but in the debate, it's not only about you, it's also about your opponents. So if you want to resolve a clash in a meaningful manner, it is simply insufficient for you to only talk about your speech. Correct? It is insufficient for you to only talk about your contributions because there are two balances when it comes to deciding a factor. You did better, your opponents did worse. Correct? So if you're only talking about strengths, you are missing out half the equation, which is talking about the weaknesses of your opponents. So in resolving a clash, it needs to be holistically talking about both parties, which is why don't only highlight your arguments. It is not a summary speech. It is basically you convincing the judge as to why your team should win based on the clashes that has happened. Okay, last thing. Please do not attempt to confuse the judge further by gaslighting them into believing that there are things they will state that after checking their notes weren't stated. So I just want you to take note that unfortunately speaking, in UADC, obviously the core puts in a lot of effort into securing the best judges. Like for example, even the institutional judges are thoroughly tested, and there are multiple edge tests as well as the test debate in order to actually ensure that the judges that are sitting in as panelists and chairs are people who are very much capable in order to judge the debate fairly as a average reasonable judge, which also means that there are probably people who are diligently taking notes. If you attempt to confuse a judge by gaslighting them and adding new things and saying that, oh, my previous speakers already said this, trust and believe, they will actually know. So please do not attempt to gaslight them for similar reasons as to why. If you do any of the things earlier, it will only sway the judges against you. In your last speech that your team is giving, you do not want to give reasons for the judges to give you the loss by lying to them. So please do not do that. That is not what a reply speaker should do. A reply speaker should be fair and should be in a very calm and collected manner, depending on what the debate requires, for you to confidently tell the judge as to why you should have won. Okay? It is not you trying to confuse and lie to your judges. Similar as to why sometimes debaters do not expect their judges to give dodgy calls, and they will thank their judges fairly for reading into the debate and succumbing to bias. You also don't want to gaslight your judge because you are essentially doing the same thing as well. So you can't blame them if they were to discredit you. So the relationship goes both ways. Okay, you should not do that. And that's pretty much it. Okay, so thank you so much for listening. I'm not sure how much of help this is to all of you, but these are just me perhaps sharing my experiences about what I take into consideration and what I should really do in my capacity as a reply speaker when I was debating for Malaya. So thank you so much. And just a disclaimer, I'm not responsible if your reply speech get tanked because your judges refuse to use a calculator. Okay, so just make sure and this goes out to the court as well, please make sure that if your judges are having trouble deciding on price, just give them a calculator. Okay, thank you so much for listening. Again, I'll probably drop by UADC. So if I see you, I'll see you, and all the best to all the teams debating in UADC, and may the best team emerge as champions in 2024 UADC. Thank you.